get to it. Are y'all able to see the link? Because there it goes. Now I've got this annoying thing out of my way. So yeah, if you go to pollev.com/ or if you're using your smartphone, and this will come up, then you can just click on that, or you can shoot that with your phone.
Everything disappeared except the Q code.
Yeah,
that would be on the phone.
Yeah, the Q code's just the other way to be able to get to the question.
When I click on the pollev.com, nothing happens.
Yeah, you probably would have to type that in to a browser or use your phone and click on this Q code.
Okay.
So Maggie, you got it? Okay. Dan, do you want the Q code or do you want to type in that address?
Give me the Q code.
All right. There you go. Yeah, Liz is a lot smarter. She got it into the chat where you can click on it. Or copy and paste.
Yeah, I think you have to copy and paste.
Okay, copy and paste. Give me back to the other one and I'll put it in.
All right, John, are you good?
Now it's a link if folks need it from the chat. Okay.
All right, awesome. All right, then let's see if y'all are answering. It's not showing up on my screen yet. And sometimes I have to leave and bring it back up. And then it gives me a big white screen. Now it's thinking.
Okay, now the questions are up there again.
Yeah.
All right. Out of the way.
You know, when you asked these questions in the survey too, and the survey had graphic images that went along with them, that was quite a bit more helpful.
Yes, that's totally fair. Yeah, we couldn't make that happen with the online version here, but you're right. In the online survey, where we have the questions, we do have pictures.
Yeah. Although some of those pictures are odd.
All right, so looks like we've got a little bit of results. John, I'm guessing since you said, yep, first that these may be yours. Dean or Maggie, have you been able to answer that first question?
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing it on the mobile app. It's a little strange because I'm trying to, you know, when I select the answer, it's like it's moving other ones up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll try doing the, I'll look in the chat and see if I can just bring up another browser.
Okay. John, and as you put them in, did it go or did you have to click submit? Okay. Yeah, so you've got to click submit.
Oh, sorry.
Aha. There's the magic of pull everywhere. Now we're getting the hang. All right, so let's, Maggie, go ahead and get yours, or did you get yours in?
Getting them in.
Okay, once you get them in and you hit submit, then my screen will probably shift again, but let's talk a little bit about it. So, I mean, right now, the number one response there is spread the growth around the large centers. Aha, there we go. Now we got everybody accounted for. So y'all are saying spread the growth on the larger centers, like the big corridors, Florida, Holly, the intersections, and then some a little bit, you know, the other type for first is less growth in the centers and corridors and more within the neighborhood. So tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about how we manage growth.
Well, I can speak. I'm an architect and I've done a lot of development. And I think that one of the keys in areas like these, especially if we want to encourage more retail is to try and concentrate on the areas that are at major centers, and not necessarily major centers like Colorado and Evans either. I think the point I saw here was that Holly and Florida, these smaller areas that are more neighborhood oriented, that I think if they were improved design wise could be more, help more access to food, access to restaurants and things locally.
Okay. Maggie, what about you?
Yeah, I didn't even think about the Holly and Florida, but I agree. Just having more opportunity for food options, like grocery stores, things like that, where it could be, people could find it as I guess a point to, like a destination point. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay. And John, feel free.
Sorry.
That's all right. John,
And
feel free
Eric-
to type if you have some thoughts as well.
Sorry. And Eric and Liz, I was just kind of out of curiosity, would it be towards the south portion of this area that there would be development opportunities? Because to Dean's earlier point, there's not much, right, where Quebec Way starts. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm thinking, ultimately this process is sponsored and will be implemented by the city of Denver. Then, yeah, when we think about that, that really sort of pushes us towards Quebec Street a little bit, because that's what the city of Denver has the ability to control. But I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Maggie, though, too, about maybe the intersection of Evans and Quebec and Evans and Quebec Way, and thinking from your comments how we design those and think about those a little bit more in the future, where they're a little bit more of a place rather than a collection of stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Let's let me go to a next question. The problem of my two screens overlapping here. Oh, great. And yep, John, I'll get to your response. So in this question, when you think about a complete neighborhood, what elements of a complete neighborhood should be prioritized in areas that are growing? So assume that development is happening within the neighborhood somewhere. As we're growing, what are our top priorities to make sure that we get out of that growth? What should be the positive result of where and how we're growing? So I think you can click on up to 3 and then hit submit on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, so John was saying relative to the last discussion about more destinations within walking distance, and making sure that where we have denser housing, apartments, new housing, that it's where the retail already is, so we can reduce traffic and car dependency. And that's pretty consistent, John, with what we've heard from some of the steering committee about, and Maggie, you referenced this too, having goods and services and restaurants and food that is actually within walking distance, somewhere you would want to go, and then be able to safely walk there and not have to have a car to get there. Okay. So it looks like housing affordability, improved mobility. Sorry, I think I just confused myself. Housing affordability, improved mobility, and more community-based businesses and uses. Great. This is going to be a really good lead into the housing discussion we're going to have in a few minutes.
I will say that one of my problems with these kind of surveys is that in a lot of ways, all of these are important. For me to say, well, improved design is out because these take precedence is kind of, I don't know, in a way that you should almost rank them. How would you rank these and then get a better sense for how important people think that all of them are instead of just some of them. That's just sorry.
No, that's fair. And I mean, part of this is data gathering and part of it is just to be a starting point for our discussion. So yeah, I mean, I think that's fine as we discuss this. If there are other pieces here, if we hadn't hamstrung you by giving you only 3, what are the other priorities that would be at the top of your list? What are the things that are most important to you individually?
Well, anytime you you design in a space along a street, how the building treats the street is of major importance to the character of the street. So when you take a street like Evans and you allow detention ponds and parking before you get to the buildings, and the buildings are removed from the street, then you no longer have a street that functions for a lot of reasons. It functions for cars, and so by by saying affordable housing is very important to me, it is, but increased setbacks or the way the building is designed along these streets and the zoning, so it is improved design, and it also includes enhanced landscaping because you're dealing with the streets and the relationship to the buildings. So I may think of things differently because if this is just to talk about discussion about housing, then I see it in different ways. And so I don't think that's less important than having affordable housing.
Okay. So two other pieces on this. I mean, one, when we say improved mobility options, what does that mean to you all? Why does that tip the scale? What do we mean when we say improved mobility options?
Well, like a bike lane would be super helpful. And also just like sidewalks.
Complete sidewalks.
Yeah, because like I just recently broke my foot. So its mobility has really been at the top of my focus right now because of how difficult it is for any disabled person to get around in the city of Denver.
Sure. Yeah, John's saying,
see walkable communities, and that requires a walkable street.
Yes.
yep.
And, ways in which you are slowing the traffic and then moving traffic, I guess, and just like, well, how do I want to say this? Slowing traffic, but also making those crosswalks more effective.
Right.
Okay.
Bulb outs. What you do is you narrow streets, you don't widen them. Traffic engineers don't like this, but you narrow them. You put bulb outs, you slow traffic down by allowing parking on it, and by planting things. So yeah, that's the kind of improvements that you need to have in your development standards, really.
Okay. Great. Is there anything on this list that isn't? So Dean, I'll take the opposite of your earlier comment. Is there anything on this list that is not that important or that is at the bottom of the list for you?
When I see housing for certain groups like senior or family friendly, I keep thinking about what kind of housing options we have in our neighborhood. And my entire neighborhood is senior. Now, it might be kind of rich senior, but and there's a lot of immigrants living in multi-family apartment buildings just to the north. So it is a rather diverse community, actually.
Yeah, and I will just comment because I lived in one of those apartments. There's no 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom options for families. And it's naturally occurring senior community. Lots of people bought those houses many years ago. There's not options for people who don't have a house who are aging.
That's very true.
Okay. Yeah, John was also saying there's not really anything historic that's worth saving since it's really a newer part of the neighborhood.
That's true.
Good point.
Okay, I'm just jotting down a few notes.
When I see enhanced landscaping, I look at Quebec and I am mad every day I see it. I mean, why that street was allowed to be built that way, and I'll reach back a little bit. That was done. Those bunkers were put in when Mayor Hickenlooper was mayor, and he promised 1 million trees, and that's what we got. It's horrible. And that whole section, Quebec is an important part of our neighborhood, and it's kind of being ignored in this whole Southeast area plan. And maybe it's because there isn't a whole lot of development along it until you get just to the south of us. But it's it's a major north-south corridor, and it gets louder and louder and busier every single day.
Okay.
And
I have-
there's no discussion about it.
Okay. There may be more discussion next Thursday. As we get into mobility, we'll probably focus a little more on the corridors, but it's a great point. All right, let me skip over to question 3. So we sort of mentioned that missing middle housing. Now, don't get too caught up on the character and the style of the images. Think a little bit more about the housing type and the density. So these are examples of different missing middle. What do you think would actually be good? I'm going to say in and around Indian Creek, because to y'all's point, there may not physically be the ability to have a lot in Indian Creek. So for the few parcels that we have in the area around, are there some that stick out more than others? I think that first response is all of them.
My response is all of them.
So all these could have a place in near southeast.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do y'all see as sort of the potential for missing middle? I mean, Molly, you were sort of speaking to the 3 bedrooms, the 4 bedrooms, different opportunities for folks. What would this missing middle housing, who would it serve ideally?
Well, I definitely think it would serve families who, maybe they're making 60%, 80% AMI, but there isn't any, there's no other options for housing types in terms of having 3 bedrooms and whatnot. Because that's what I saw a lot, was a family of 4 being shoved into a 2-bedroom. So that makes it pretty, it makes it uncomfortable for them for sure, but there aren't any options in the apartment market there. And there's not that many apartments in that area. There's more over in Lowry, but they don't have any 3-bedroom options.
Yeah. The project that's being built on South Quebec Way right now looks kind of like the row houses in C, although they're broken down into 4 or 5s and I think I noticed that there were some 3-bedroom units in there.
Yeah, you're right. And that's like the first of its kind.
Eric, is there any area I know that Denver Water Board has some property along the creek development there. Is there any part of Denver back into the closer to Evans, or is Denver just stop right at the where it starts getting industrial there? I guess what I'm asking is there any potential for some of that industrial area to be redeveloped as what we're talking about over to Evans?
It's a good question. Liz, do you happen?
Or is that Arapahoe County? I think it's
I
Arapahoe.
don't have that. I'll try to pull it up and I can put it in the chat.
Yep, I'm cheating a little bit too. Oh, but every time I zoom in far enough, Google wants to evade me. So
Yeah, because you're not in Denver anymore.
I'm gonna let Liz look at that one for a second, Dean.
That's okay. It doesn't.
She's gonna have a better feeling than I will.
It's not important. I think what we're talking about though is if there's an opportunity for redevelopment in the Indian Creek area, what would we think would be appropriate? And because we have so many options, I think we all kind of feel like any of these is appropriate.
Okay. And John was sort of mentioning, he'd be okay with taller buildings as well. So John, where would those most likely go? Where would you be okay with taller buildings, and where would they make sense in and around the neighborhoods? Okay, yeah, so sort of mixed in those corridors and the retail. Yeah, and there are a lot of places in Sunbelt cities. We could argue whether Denver Sunbelt or not, probably really not, but a lot of places where we're over retailed. And I think as we continue to see shifts in retail, we're going to see some of those older strip centers become great places for multifamily housing in the future, because there's simply going to be too much land devoted to retail. And we're gonna have to figure out
where Burger King is. I mean, I think about that. It's right there on Leedsdale and Quebec. I mean, there is so much open land over there, and that retail is just not being, I mean, it's not active.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, because we don't have any relationship with Arapahoe County, it's hard to plan for both. But there really isn't much retail zoned in Indian Creek. I think the only retail zoning we've got is back where Quebec Way hits Quebec. I can't think of another retail zone in Indian Creek at all. So it's not really a walkable community in that sense. I mean, I walk 6 miles, but most people don't do that to go grocery shopping.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we got pretty good agreement on that. Are there any criteria under which you think this more denser, different housing types, would be okay? Some people have some reservations about, I'm not sure I'm okay with slightly denser housing, but I would be okay with it if it were on corner lots or on larger streets or on larger lots, or if it was affordable and helping with our affordability challenge. So do any of these sort of resonate with you? So larger streets, the edges of the neighborhoods as transitions, a little bit of everywhere, larger lots.
I would agree with those two. Sorry.
Okay. Ooh, around the edges got a second vote, so it shifted all the bars. Okay. I mean, y'all generally, as a group though, y'all generally seem pretty open. I mean, in terms of diversifying the housing, yes, it's probably going to make more sense to put them on the bigger corridors and in transition areas between existing development and industrial, or existing development and commercial, but
It's hard to fit ADUs in these neighborhoods. It really is.
yeah, they're pretty compact to begin with, right?
Although, well, they're controlled, they're covenant controlled, so you can't.
Well, yeah,
My HOA would never allow it, even if it might be a good idea. I mean, the lots aren't very large, so it'd be very difficult to do anyway. But
yeah,
I think ADUs are a great idea. They're just not appropriate for the kind of housing stock we have here.
yeah. So ADU, accessory dwelling unit. So where you've got, just to be clear that we're all speaking the same language. So in a lot of cities now, and Denver is looking at accessory dwelling units across the entire city, but it's where if you have a single family home, having an in-law suite, or being able to build an apartment above the garage, or having sort of that second housing unit, yeah, and a granny house or an in-law suite, having that second unit on a single family lot. And depending on how the code is written, and Liz, I don't know Denver's code specifically enough. In some cases, it has to be an accessory unit. Like it can't be, you can't split your lot basically into two fee simple housing units. It has to be subservient to the primary residence.
Correct. For an accessory dwelling unit, the owner needs to like live on the site, and then they can rent out the second unit. It's generally has to be smaller than the primary one too.
Can I ask you, Liz, a question in terms of what Denver would allow? Since there are different housing types in this area, just to the north of our area is a PUD, and it's got lots that are bought for, on duplexes. But once you get beyond the I guess just to the north, there's more duplexes, but they have lots. Would Denver, even if Denver allowed that, these HOAs wouldn't. But when do you get into the condition where that's kind of gray area, where you could, when an HOA doesn't control it?
Yeah, the zoning is kind of distinct. There are these places like you're mentioning that have an HOA that might have layers on top of that. So that would be like a whole nother conversation amongst the HOA about whether they wanted to change those rules. But the zoning itself could be changed to allow that.
But they're all pretty much always single-family dwelling lots on gridded streets that this is occurring.
Generally where it's allowed today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So this last question is really about trade-offs that, adding missing middle, I'm getting tongue-tied now, options into existing neighborhoods, although we've talked about some of the physical limitations of doing that in Indian Creek. Again, if you think a little bit bigger about near Southeast and some of the adjacent neighborhoods as well, this question sort of gets to the character aspect of, if you could find a way to incorporate those accessory dwelling units, we'd still want to make sure we do what. And so things like maintaining yards, limiting parking impacts, keeping housing prices lower, using that as a means to limit displacement and folks not being able to stay in the neighborhood. So if there's anything else on this list that pops out, that's sort of the design criteria to some extent associated with those missing middle options. Yeah, parking impacts, John, I think a lot of times with this missing middle, you don't necessarily have to have a parking space for every unit. And so people worry about, if that's the code, that it creates more cars with less assigned parking places, and it forces more on-street parking and eventually parking shortages. So that's a concern that sometimes people have when you're sort of creating this infill density within the neighborhoods. Cool. Any other thoughts on impacts or trade-offs? All right, we got about 13 minutes and we have one other section and 3 questions to go. So this sort of becomes a little bit of the lightning round. Let me get my PowerPoint back up here. So housing and economy, we're going to talk a little bit more about housing, but then zero in a little bit on the affordability aspect. So Maggie, as you mentioned, affordability is a concern, not only in Indian Creek, but in all of near Southeast. Most of the development is market rate and increasing in value. So that's creating some concern over gentrification, losing some of the diversity within the area. So one of the priorities of the plan is maintaining affordable housing within the community, or figuring out a way to keep some or create some. So this next set of questions really gets at affordability, preventing displacement, and then goes a little bit into homelessness. So let me again go back to my poll everywhere and pull that back up. And we've got 3 questions in this regard. So one, when we think about affordable housing, affordable for who? So what are the types of units that you think would be the most important as part of an affordability strategy? For seniors, for families, larger families with the 3 bedrooms, or families, doesn't even have to be larger necessarily. Making sure that it's owner occupied, or are you open to supportive housing arrangements, group homes, different scenarios where we're able to provide assistance, transitions for folks? Okay, so it looks like larger units is sort of our first priority, having it be owner occupied is our second priority, and then seniors and supportive housing types third. Any comments or thoughts on that?
I think if you added more for sale units that were at, well, let's just take as an example, all of the work that, oh my gosh, I cannot think of the developer, but they build, why am I blanking on their name? Anyway, they build, for sale, affordable housing, essentially.
Global?
They have, people have to buy it and they have to work. I can't think of the name, but at any rate, so I think if you could offer some more for sale options, that would help ease the housing burden. And I think permanent supportive housing is great, but I think you need a lot of services, a lot of wraparound services for people who are experiencing a need for permanent supportive housing. And so you've got to have a grocery store. Yeah, there's one for King Soopers, but I think you have to really rethink what else is there around there that people in that in that stratosphere will be able to access easily for themselves.
Okay. Great. And John, I am keeping an eye on the chat too. I'm just moving my screens around. If you want to chime in as well. All right, 2 more. So how do we prevent involuntary displacement? What would be our best strategies or our best options for, as people age, as the values continue to increase in the area, what would we do to limit displacement?
When you say preserving unsubsidized affordable housing, and you're saying you're saying market rate,
I think that's
essentially.
I think that's more naturally occurring affordable housing. So units
Gotcha,
that are
okay.
older, where the prices have started to moderate a little bit, those often become the targets of
Gotcha.
redevelopment activity.
Yep.
So more affordable units, that's sort of on the supply side. Support for existing homeowners is, working with existing folks to be able to maintain and keep their home in a safe, affordable manner. Okay. And then lots of other things are sort of registering at that 3rd level. Great. And let's get one more on homelessness. So what types of temporary shelter models might be the most helpful in and around this area for those who are dealing with homelessness? Oh, congregate and non-congregate shelters. That's a good question. I need a good definition for that, John. I mean, basically it's sort of like group home, where you've got, a larger house that has multiple bedrooms, and folks each typically tend to have their own bedroom or share a bedroom, but then have common spaces.
That's the non-congregate?
Oh, that would be congregate.
But then the non-congregate would be where they're leaving for the day, right?
That's a good question. I'm cheating and looking it back up in Denver context, because sometimes it's different in different communities. Yeah, I guess in this context, I guess we're using non-congregate as sort of like emergency, short-term, temporary. Sheltering. Okay. So any thoughts or details related to this? Looks like tiny homes y'all would be open to as a first priority. Ooh, and then I got the warning from Scott too. So is there anything else related to land use, development, or housing that we have not had a chance to discuss?
Is there any opportunity that Denver or, like Urban Land Conservancy could do any kind of land banking? If that's a possibility of any parcel around there that could be purchased for maybe land banking in the future.
Okay. With a aim to doing what in the long term with it, Maggie?
Affordable housing.
Okay. Yeah, we're seeing, I mean, we're definitely seeing that employed in other parts of the country much more aggressively now. And it's definitely a great tool to have in your toolbox that if, I mean, hopefully we're not hitting a recession, but you know, if you hit a recession and property values and land values start to drop, it's a great opportunity to bank land to be used for public good in the future. All right, looks like they're going to give us about 50 more seconds. Any other parting shots or big takeaways from?
I am curious about this, since it was brought up in this discussion, was the site of the industrial site at Cherry Creek Drive in Quebec.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
that's really under an option, because I was even thinking of starting some kind of a petition to have that thing removed. It's a problem. I mean, it's a noise problem, it's a pollution problem, and it's just, I mean, I kind of like the fact that I'm the closest to the trash on trash days, but that's the only reason. It's a terrible thing to have near housing.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Dean, if you consider coming back next Thursday, I will do some research between now and next Thursday and see what I can find on that.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Right.
We'll see y'all in the big room in just a second.
All right. I think everyone should now be back in the meeting. So we'd like each group, if each facilitator can give us sort of the most important thing that your group discussed. We want to keep this quick so folks can get out of here by 7:30. But if we can do that, so let's start with Goldsmith, if the Goldsmith Neighborhood would like to share quickly.
Of course. So I think the main theme that really ran throughout our discussions was the need for affordable housing that remains affordable housing. We talked a lot about how housing that may be affordable today, those prices may escalate over time. So ensuring that any housing that's being added is keeping that affordability into the future.
Great, thanks, Aiden. If Indian Creek would like to go.
Yeah, so you know what we talked about in Indian Creek is there's a lot of Indian Creek that is really built out, and there are only a few key places where we're likely to have development in the future. So there was a lot of conversation about the corridors, some of the challenges that are facing the corridors today in terms of accessibility and mobility, and then looking at opportunities to reposition sites, also to create some affordability, greater diversity in housing types. And there was an openness to greater density transitioning back to existing built neighborhoods.
Thanks, Eric. I just put in the chat the link to the form. You can go put your email in if you want a chance to win a $20 gift card to Target or a local restaurant in near Southeast. We'll do a drawing after the next meeting on the 10th. You can do that while we finish up the wrap up. University Hills North, if you'd like to share.
Oh, sorry. So we actually combined with Goldsmith because of our numbers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Libby. Virginia Village.
Yeah, Scott, I'll just add a little bit here. We talked a lot about maintaining the neighborhood character and also kind of creating safer environments, specifically along corridors. Evans was mentioned quite a bit. And then also kind of the inclusion of more kind of smaller public open spaces. So maybe more wider landscape and kind of open areas for folks to enjoy.
Thanks, Jason. I just realized I was sharing the wrong screen there. All right, so like I said, go to the link, enter your email for a chance to win. Thank you, Jason. And then I think we had Cortland in Washington, Virginia Vale.
Yeah, so I think a theme of our conversation in Washington, Virginia Vale was similar to what Jason just said. Maintaining the existing character of the neighborhood. And so some ideas that were given by the participants in that group included an interest in basement accessory dwelling units as a way of allowing more residential without changing the look and feel of the neighborhood. Also limiting the size or scale of new development so it fits in better. So an example of that is that there's a lot of areas in the neighborhood that have single story character. So if a new house was built that was multi-story, that would start to impact that. So there's a desire to try to make everything fit in with the neighborhood as it looks today.
Thanks, Cortland. And we just had a couple folks that stayed in the area-wide section, but similar discussion. We had a lot of discussion around the need for more housing, but how to make sure that that fits in with the neighborhood and doesn't negatively impact the folks who already enjoy living in near Southeast. So with that, we will. What is that? Okay. Give me just a second on the. Anyone can respond. Okay. I think I fixed the form. Try it again. I'll put the link again in the chat. Sorry about that. I forgot to check a box. Okay, thank you everyone for participating tonight. Sounds like we had some really good discussion. Really appreciate your patience earlier in the meeting when we had the trouble with the breakout rooms. We will try to get that fixed for our next meeting, which, as I said, is Thursday, March 10th. So encourage you all to join for that again for discussions around mobility and parks and landscaping and sustainability. As I mentioned, the surveys are on the website, denvergov.org/near-southeast plan. If you have questions, there's a question form on there you can submit and we will respond. Lots of opportunities to participate coming up. So we hope you will do that and tell your friends, tell your neighbors to participate as well. With that, I will let everyone go. Just a couple minutes past 7:30. Have a beautiful Tuesday evening, and I hope to see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you all for doing this.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.